Played inside for Marsh. Looking around, seeing who he can pick up. Decides to go one in. Oh my goodness, what a goal! Oh, what a tremendous goal by Marsh!
Okay, this is a far post header interview. This time it's with Rodney Marsh. Good afternoon, Rodney. How are you?
How you doing?
Pleasure to speak to you. I've got a few questions to ask you about your career. Starting all the way back with your youth football, where you played West Ham United before moving to Fulham. What was it like playing at West Ham youth level?
Well, I was recruited in school as an amateur player in my mid-teens, and I stayed at West Ham until I was 15, almost 16, and played for their South East Counties team a few times. They didn't think I was going to make it, and they just let me go. So that was age of just about 16 when I left West Ham. Yeah, but I was at school.
Oh, right. Okay, so were there any other players that then went on to make their name in the game that were playing alongside you at that point?
Yeah, just a few. Jeff Hurst, Martin Peters, Bobby Moore, they were all a couple of years older than me. So when I was around 14, they were like 17, 18. Um, and John Sissons was playing at the time as well. Another outside left, John Sissons. And they were just a fantastic group of young players. So I guess there was no room for me.
No, but you did find a career starting at Fulham. They took you on, and just before the World Cup, you made the move over to Loftus Road to play for QPR. And
Yeah.
first full season, get to Wembley for the League Cup final, and you're playing as a third division side against West Brom, who were in the first division at the time.
Yeah.
Almost 100,000 people at Wembley. What are your memories of the game?
Well, in the year, that was my first year there, we actually done the double. We won the championship of what was then the old third division. I guess that's now the second division, I guess now.
Yeah.
Or maybe, no. It's the first division now because you got the championship and then the
Yes.
Premier League. So, yeah. So, yeah, we won the double. Never been done before, never been done since. Probably will never ever be done again, where a lower division team does a double. And yeah, it was a fantastic time for me.
And you scored the equaliser that day as well as in the second half.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were 2-0 down at half time. West Bromwich Albion had 11 internationals. We had none. And we came back to win 3-2 in what was many people said was one of the most remarkable comebacks of a lower division team ever. So yeah, it was good.
And so they, as you say, QPR won the league title that year, and then you won what was the second division the season after. What reason do you think that the side was so successful at that time?
Well, it was very much a team. I got a lot of the glory personally because I scored 44 goals in my first season. But it was very much a team, and many of the team that won the double went on into the top division. But I got injured in pre-season training for that big season. Alex Stock was the manager, and I think I missed the first 18 games of the season, so that experience wasn't so great.
But then over the course of that sort of late 60s, early 70s, you gained a reputation of being a great skillful player and putting some great performances at QPR. A couple of notable hat tricks. Birmingham was one that I've seen on YouTube, where one of the goals particularly thumped the ball in from the edge of the box, and QPR fans always hold you in high regard. What were your favourite memories of your time at Loftus Road?
Too many great memories. I had a fantastic time at QPR. It was the happiest time of my career. And I suppose you'd have to say the League Cup final, because before that QPR had never won a trophy. I don't think I've ever won a trophy since, but so I'd have to say that the winning the League Cup and the way we won it was probably the highlight of well, not only my career at QPR, but many players as well, and many fans.
Of course, of course. And you were given the opportunity to play for England 9 times by Sir Alf Ramsey.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
you describe what it's like to be able to put on the England shirt and play for your country?
Well, it's a kind of a paradoxical, in my case, it was kind of a paradox, because even though it was my life's sort of dream to play for my country, and it was, and I did, I kind of had a love-hate relationship with Sir Alf Ramsey, the England manager, and we just didn't get along, and I really didn't enjoy my games, although I did enjoy playing for my country.
And you scored a goal as well, so that's one bonus as well, being able to say you've scored for your country.
Yeah, somebody once said that to me. I did an interview about a long time ago, and somebody said that only 1% of players that play for England, only I think it was only 1%, actually score a goal. So I'm actually in quite good company.
Well, yeah, exactly. The 1% club.
Indeed,
Fantastic.
yeah, something like that. Anyway.
And
Yeah.
you played in a club level. You played sort of alongside some great players, and in an era where there were teams like Bill Shankly's Liverpool. I've got to say, as an Arsenal fan, the time when we won the double in 70-71, Brian
Yeah,
Clough,
of course, yeah.
Derby, Leeds, Don Revie. There must have been a special time to be playing.
Well, it was special because in those days there were a lot of great British players playing, and I mean British with due respect, because there was players like Dennis Law and Kenny Dalglish of Scotland, Jim Baxter, I mean Jimmy Johnson. The list goes on and on and on. I just picked out a couple, and then you had Welsh players, you know. But Mike England at Spurs was a great player. And you had the Irish boys as well. I mean, Ireland was producing so many great players at that time. There were a lot of great British players playing in the top league. So it was a special time. And those times now, of course, have changed.
Of course. And you were in and around the England squad around 1973, 1974, and we didn't qualify for the World Cup at that time. What reason would you put it down to that we ultimately fell short in the qualification?
Well, there was a huge game that England dropped points in, and that was Poland at Wembley. And in a game that everybody thought we were going to win, and that we only got a draw. And dropped 2 points, or dropped points in those days, and that was a big letdown. And but I didn't look at it in those terms. I looked at it back then. I looked at it as me playing for England and England not qualifying. I didn't look at that personally at all. I didn't say that personally at all. No.
And you also around that time, Malcolm Allison signed you for Manchester City. I noticed earlier. Had a look. It was a fee that was a world record transfer at that time, for 200,000, I think it was. And did you ever let that transfer fee? Did it ever play on your mind at all, or was it something that you didn't think of and just played the game as you would normally? How did that? Did it have any pressure at all on you?
Well, it's a fascinating dynamic of the transfer fee versus the player. And you look at today's football, like Jack Grealish at Man City or Declan Rice to Arsenal, and I think it's a different dynamic, because in those days the media attention on those players, on those really highly high transfer fees. The media was staggering. Today you don't tend to get media following around Declan Rice saying he's £100 million player and he hasn't scored a goal, or he hasn't done this, or he hasn't done that. You don't tend to get that as much today as you did then. So it was a different dynamic.
It's like stratospheric differences in the transfer fees that, over the years, but, even sort of 10, 20 years ago, there weren't millions, 100 million now and more, and the wages have gone up astronomically. So, I mean, £200,000 then was a huge amount of money for a player to join, and now it's, what somebody earns in about 20 minutes or something like that, isn't it? So it's amazing how the game's changed over the years. I was going to mention, because of your time at Manchester City, they were leading the league at that point, and then you joined. Some Manchester City fans say that wasn't, it didn't quite work out at that season, but you certainly helped the following couple of seasons. You were top goal scorer for the club. And do you have good memories of your time at Main Road?
Sensational memories. I had the happiest 4 years of my life, in a professional sense, not necessarily in a playing sense, but as a professional athlete. Those 4 years was just fantastic. I was very, very happy there. There's a what's the word I'm looking for? Dichotomy, because when I went there, they were 5 points clear and lost the championship. We lost the championship, and many people said, and even today, I go and maybe go and speak to a group of people, and the first question is, did you cost City the championship when you signed for them? That was 50 years ago, and it's still the number one question that I get around the world. And the answer, of course, is yes, because if they hadn't assigned me, they would have gone on playing the same way, and we've probably gone on and won the title. But that's not my fault. It's not my responsibility to pick a team. I'm just a football player.
Exactly, and it was Malcolm Allison who brought you in, so perhaps you could say that it was Malcolm Allison that made that decision. And not that you'd have said it at the time, because I've heard that he was a bit of a fearsome character. So, but
no, we were very close. Malcolm and I were very close as personally and professionally. We were very close together. Not before I joined Man City, but as life went on. And I always respected him as one of the greatest coaches that I ever played for. So that's a non-starter. That back and forth that people try and put in between us. That's just wrong.
No, it was only a joke, but it's one of those things that, as you say, that must be something that follows around, as you say, follows around with you, and is your number one question. That must be quite difficult to have to answer.
Well, I suppose from one point of view, yes, but from another point of view, it's all what fans want, isn't it? Fans. The fact they still remember me is great anyway, so I don't kind of mind that. But as generations go on, they tell their sons, and they tell their sons, and this is 50 years ago, and they're still telling their sons and grandsons that Rodney Marsh cost them a championship. Not all of them, but a lot of them do.
Well, the City team of that time were playing great football. Mike Summerby, Colin Bell, yourself. There was some great football being played at that time in an era where there was.
Franny Lee was playing then. Wyn Davis, Mike Doyle, Alan Oakes. It was a great team. And I kind of upset the balance, and that's what happens. Sometimes that's what happens, and that's not down to the player, because all a player can do is play football.
And that's what you were employed to do, and you did that well. And they've got a lot of, as you say, there's a lot of Manchester City fans, having looked online at some of their memories and things, and it's all fond memories, and perhaps they should not think about the fact that that transfer came in towards the end of that part of the season, maybe. So who
Indeed.
knows? I was going to say there were towards the end of that your time at Main Road, you were sort of enticed maybe to go to the US to go and play in Tampa. How did that move come about to go to the States?
Well, I'd had a big falling out with the manager and subsequently the chairman, Peter Swales, and not dissimilar than Jadon Sancho say with Eric Ten Hag, not dissimilar at all. And I was in a situation where I'd been very critical of the manager and the chairman and much of the way the football club was being run, because it was a great team. We were a great team of players, you know, with Dennis Stewart and Joe Royal and Asa Hartford and Colin Bell, and wonderful team. But we weren't progressing, and we were, and we were letting players go and not replacing them. And I was very vocal about that, and that in the end, they treated Tony Book, the manager, treated me very similarly to how Ten Hag's treating Jadon Sancho. And I had a phone call from John's manager, who said Elton John's been reading about what's going on in the paper up in Manchester. Would you like to come to his concert? He wants to talk to you. So I said, yeah, sure. And he said, well, it's in Los Angeles, in America, California. He said, and he's prepared to put you on his private plane to come to LA. He wants to sign you and George Best. He's going to buy the Los Angeles Aztecs, the North American Soccer League team. So I said to Tony Book, Tony, I've had this opportunity. Do you want? He said, well, I want to get rid of you, so you can go anywhere you like. So I went there and met with Elton John several times. And while I was there, I got a phone call from the owner of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And he said, come down to Tampa, give us a look first, Rodney, before you sign for Elton John. I went down to Tampa and I've never looked back. I've still got a house there.
Yeah, I remember you saying, as you say, down in Tampa. And you, as you mentioned, George Best, there were other players like Pele, Franz Beckenbauer, and other greats. They were all joined by other various first division players that came over. What do you think the lure was to leave established first division football, where they could have maybe dropped down to the second tier, to then come over to play America? Because the level then at that time was amateur level almost, wasn't it? So you weren't playing with
certain parts of it, but no, hang on. Certain parts of it were, but there were other parts of the league where they signed 5 or 6 top players from different countries, and there were a lot of great players playing in America. It was like a who's who of great players. It was brought down by the standard of some of the players, the local players, that had to play in games because that was the rule of FIFA and the North American Soccer League. So, but there were some really, truly great players.
Yeah. Okay. And I've like I say, I've seen some of the footage at the time. I've seen some great videos of you with your long blonde hair and running through loads of different players. You got George Best taking on 2 or 3 defenders a couple of times and going back, and that the football in the 70s in America, it's being played on American football pitches. So you've got the 10-yard lines all across the pitch and things like that. So it looks completely different to how it is now. For example,
it was different.
Yeah, like it was sort of just coming into the forefront of American culture. Them seeing this game of soccer, where they've obviously got American football and hockey and basketball and baseball. So that obviously brought attention to the sport over there.
Well, yeah, and baseball. A lot of the baseball fields were used for soccer as well. So, but it was a changing time, and it was a big time, and it was when Pele came to America. Before me, by the way, Pele came before me, and that changed the whole situation. Everybody around the world started looking at America, and here we are. That was in 1976. So here we are. a long time later, and Lionel Messi goes to Miami. So, I think there's a lot to be said for the pioneers that went out there in the first place, and I guess I was one of those.
Could very well put you down to that. Yes, definitely. I was then going to mention as well, when you had a loan spell during that time, you came back to England and played for Fulham, and my uncle he was going to games then, watching you and George Best, Bobby Moore, and other great players playing a couple of levels down. And there's video that I've seen numerous times when you're playing Hereford and you tackle George Best, and then he comes and tackles you, and you're almost clowning around and toying with the opposition. That must have been a great time to be able to play as well back in England.
Well, that was what do you call that? That's 1 in 10 million, because you can do those sort of things when you're winning 4-0, as we were. And you've got players that come back from America with a bit of a showbiz attitude, as Bessie was one of the greatest players that ever played the game, by the way.
Sure.
So it was a bit of fun. It didn't last long; it only lasted about half a season. But it was great. It was great fun, and it was an honour and a privilege to play with the late great Bobby Moore.
Yes, he went there after his long time at West Ham, didn't he? After, well,
that's right.
Well known for his
That's right,
time
yeah.
there, then moved to the Cottage. After your career, you then moved into coaching for a few years as well, late 70s, early 80s. How did that compare to being a player?
Well, I was useless as a coach. That's another contradiction in terms, because the first year I coached, we won the championship in the first year. Nothing to do with me. That was all about the players. And that was in 1980. It was my first year as a coach, and it was in the lower league. It's like the second division now. The championship now. And I was coaching in America, and we had an expansion franchise, Carolina Lightning. Right. And in the first year, we won the whole thing, and my coaching career was all downhill from there.
You can't describe yourself as useless if you win the league in your first season, even if it was the players.
Well, no, but excuse me. There's things that happen in your life that are contradictory, contradiction in terms, and I know the game. I love the game. I still have my radio show in America on Sirius XM. It's called Grumpy Pundits.
Yes, I've heard about this.
Yeah, and it's good fun, actually. So I do get the game, and I do understand the game. Sure. It's just that I always found that communication was my problem, to try to communicate my ideas to players. And I'm looking at the players looking back at me as though I've got 3 heads. I was asking them to do things. And I was a very poor communicator in a coaching sense. Now, in life and other things, and in the media, that's probably my number one ability, is being a communicator, but not as a coach.
Which, of course, is vital for the job. So, after your playing career, I'd say that the most notable time, certainly the one thing that I remember, because I was too young to remember you playing, my dad remembers you. He went to Fulham and watched you as well at that time, was when you became a pundit on Soccer Saturday. Now, that was quite an odd concept for those that have never watched, and there's a sort of 4 former players sitting around watching television and then saying what they could see on their screen to people that couldn't then see it. But it was for a concept like that, became so successful over the years. You must have had some great memories at that time.
Well, I was there for 11 years, so I had 11 years at Sky Sports and really enjoyed until they sacked me. For the joke about the tsunami and Newcastle and David Beckham, I told that joke live on the air, and they didn't like that, so they sacked me. But I had 11 years there. I had 11 very, very happy years there. And when I first got the call about doing it, doing the original show. It was me, George Best, Frank McClintock, and I think it was Phil Thompson
Yes.
in the early days. And the producer, the guy who never gets any credit for it, his name was Andrew Hornet, who nobody knows, nobody will ever know unless they listen to this.
Yes.
Who come up with the idea of sitting behind a burger bar, watching the games on television, and then telling the fans what you're seeing, and that was just outrageous. But the money was good, so I thought I'd give it a crack, and it turned out to be very natural, very unscripted, and the original presenter was a guy called Paul Dempsey, who was a little bit straighter than Jeff Stelling in terms of Jeff always had a twinkle in his eye, Jeff Stelling. And when he came on board, it changed everything. When Jeff Stelling came on board, it changed the whole dynamic. And he and I, in particular, I thought we got on great together because he could sense me, I could sense him, and the way that it works. It was a great time. I really enjoyed it.
It was definitely like that. I think when it went from Paul Dempsey to Jeff Stelling, he was more with the voice of a fan, wasn't he? You know, he's a Hartlepool diehard fan, so he was able to give that side of things and showed his emotions, and we could understand as fans watching the show through what he was saying, and as well as getting the insight of former players.
There's again a contradiction in terms because Paul Dempsey was a tremendously professional presenter. Paul Dempsey was a first-class presenter. Jeff Stelling, I don't know if he still does. I don't get to see him much on TV these days, but Jeff had an edge. He had an edge about him when you didn't know whether he was going to laugh or not, and you didn't know whether he was going to be angry or not, and you didn't know how he was going to react to a team getting beat or not. And there was that the unknown, and you throw the unknown presenter into 4 unknown characters, you kind of got a good show.
Absolutely, it worked, and it was one of those things that I used to look forward to games on Saturdays when I wasn't going and watching my team Aldershot. When they were away somewhere, I knew that the afternoon, sat down, watched Soccer Saturday, and it was an afternoon of entertainment. It wasn't just, like with the BBC, it was scripted with final score. It was a rigid format. Soccer Saturday would just go off, and you'd have players, former players like yourselves, who would go off on tangent. You wouldn't get on or completely disagree with Frank McClintock. He would then have a bit of a disagreement with Bestie, and it just worked out, and it was just really great show.
Well, to put that into context, we weren't afraid to go back and forth with each other. It was like there was a rundown to the show, but Jeff at times, I remember Jeff saying how difficult he found it sometimes to keep the herding the cats into the group. It was like, how do I take care of all this? And of course he did a magnificent job. And the original Soccer Saturday, and again, I was there for 11 years, so it's something that I kind of went all the way through. It was genuine. It was real.
Yes.
And people would say things. I always remember George Best one day. There was something happening about the hooliganism, and as you know, it's a live program, so you can't make this stuff up. This is live, right?
Yeah.
And it's it was about hooliganism, and there was a Taylor report that came out, and the Taylor report said, we're going to have to go to all-seater stadiums because of the hooliganism. We've got to try and find a way. And Jeff Stelling said to George, I'll never forget this. He said, George, what do you think about the Taylor report and all-seater stadiums? And George he said, that'll never work. He said, the fans won't stand for all-seater stadiums. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it to be funny, but all of us, you could actually hear the producers in the gallery all laughing. It was just so funny and so natural, and you don't get that. You don't get
No,
that today. So on that particular show, that they seem to have lost that spontaneity. It seems to
yeah,
be more rehearsed today. Yeah.
definitely. One final question, and it is about Soccer
Sure.
Saturday. Um,
Sure.
well, actually, it's more of an observation was that Bradford City. You saying that they wouldn't stay up, and then they did, and you
Yeah.
getting your head shaved on the pitch. That was one of my favourite highlights of your time on the show. That was just I really enjoyed that
Yeah.
because I didn't think you'd go through with it, and you did, and that's
Well,
a
what happened was it's very cleverly managed by a guy called Jeffrey Richmond.
mhm.
Was it Jeffrey Richmond? I think his name was Jeffrey Richmond. I
He's
might
the
have that wrong,
chairman,
by the
or
way.
was.
Was he the chairman of Bradford?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, you might need to check the name. But anyway, so after I made the comment, they were the worst team I'd ever seen in the Premier League. And I
Mm.
said that if Bradford stay up, I'd go to Bradford and shave my head on the pitch, have my head shaved on the pitch. And as the season went on, they were useless. They're getting worse and worse and worse. And then suddenly, and you can check this because this is quite funny, suddenly Wimbledon went on a run of taking 2 points out of 33. Wimbledon dropped 31 points. I'll never ever forget this. And it comes to the last game, and David Weatherall scores a
Yes.
magnificent header. Yeah, and they stay up, and right away, the chairman Jeffrey Richmond, if I apologise if I got his name wrong, he called the show, and he said, "When's Rodney Marsh coming to Bradford to have his head shaved?" And blah, blah. And he sort of set me up that I couldn't say no to it. So I said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do." I said, "I'll come up there, but I want it to be a fundraiser. I want to raise some funds for the local charity." And
Mm.
then the radio station got involved, and then the newspaper got involved. And the following season, we all went up there and we did the on the field head shave, and they raised £20,000 for the Burns unit. Do you remember they had the fire
Yes.
and all
Yes.
the and all the children that got psychologically damaged, and there was no way of getting their money, and we raised 20 grand for that. So
Not
all's well
bad,
that ends well.
indeed. And on that, thank you very much for your time, Rodney.
No, it's
Okay.
always a pleasure. See ya.